Hey guys, this is Mitch with FinePoint CGI, and today we're going to talk about creating a turret-like enemy, and in this case it's an archer inside of Godot using C#. So we're going to go through the process of creating the enemy. We're going to go ahead and code its detection system. We're going to go through the process of raycasting to determine if the player is behind an object. We're going to go ahead and set up all of our animations and shoot our projectiles and do damage to the player. And this is kind of part of my tutorial series of creating a 2D character controller. Kind of, at this point, it's moving more towards like being an actual 2D platformer. But, you know, if you feel like it, you can watch the previous videos. If not, this one is a standalone video. So that's what I have in store for you guys today. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so the first thing that we need to do is we need to go ahead and do a little bit of housekeeping. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to right click the player. I am going to come down here and I am going to save branch as scene as player. I'm going to click save, and same thing with spike trap. I'm going to right click it, save branch as scene, spike trap. Now that we've got that done, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and right click, add a node, add a 2D node. I am going to right click, add a node, add an animated sprite. And I'm going to right click and add in an area 2D. And what this area 2D object is going to be is it's going to be the enemy's detection radius. And what that's going to do is it's going to tell the character, or the enemy in this case, that something has gotten into its radius that it can go ahead and raycast to try to hit it. So then, if you look at the detection radius, it says, hey, you need to have a collision shape or collision polygon. So what we're going to do is we're going to right click and add in a collision shape, and we're going to go ahead and make that into a circle here. And let's go ahead and just make it something fairly large, something like that. And then we're going to go ahead and right click our node 2D and add in a position 2D. This is the bullet or arrow or projectile. I guess projectile would be better. And what we're going to do is we'll figure out where this is supposed to be, but we'll keep it in the center for right now. But that's where that's going to spawn. So actually we'll say projectile spawn. All right. Now with the animated sprite, we've got a little exclamation point here. So let's go ahead and go over to our frames and add in a new sprite frames. And go ahead and click on that. Now in my case, I'm going to go ahead and use the Archer Hero by Dark Pixel. This is a really cool little character thing that he's got, which has a bunch of cool little things. So if you wanted your character to actually be an archer, right, this is a pretty good little design here. But in my case, I'm just going to go ahead and use this for our little project. So let's go ahead and download it. Download now, and hit no thank you, and then just click on download. And you see I've already downloaded it, so I'm just going to hit cancel. If I come over to my downloads, you will see that I have Archer Hero here. I've already extracted it. You can just right click it and extract it if you'd like. And I basically just copied this, so Control C, and let's go over to our project, which in my case it's Document Celeste Like Tutorial. This has been like my ongoing little platformer like series that I've been doing with you guys. So I'm just going to throw it in my platform Metrovania assets. And then we are going to go back to the project, and you'll see that it loads it in right here. So we're going to go ahead and select all of these, go to Import, Presets, 2D Pixel. And now that we have that, let's click on our animated sprite, make sure that our sprite frames is up like it is, and we are going to click on this little Add Frames to Sprite Sheet, or from a sprite sheet, and we're going to pick Normal Attack. So we're going to go with 8 and 4, and we are going to go ahead and click on these like so. And that's going to go ahead and give us a little animation. So if we kind of zoom in on our guy and we go to our default animation and we play it, he just shoots a little arrow. Awesome. So now that we have that, let's change this to shooting. So next we're going to go ahead and add a new animation. We're going to call it idle. And we are going to click on our little add frames. We're going to choose our idle. And we're going to change this to 8 and 2. And we're going to click on these two, which is his 2 idle frames. And we're going to add those 2 frames. So now if we go ahead and play that, that's his little idle animation. Now we're going to probably want to slow that down by quite a bit. We're probably going to want to slow it down to like 3 frames per second. So it doesn't look like he's having a seizure. We can maybe go down to 2 frames per second. That's not too shabby. Awesome. So now that we've got that, what we can do is we can stop his little animation. And we can call this Archer Enemy. We're going to go ahead and right click, attach a script, and we're going to say archerenemy.cs, and we're going to create that. Okay, so now that we've got our basic stuff set up, what we're going to do is we are going to connect our 2 Area 2D events that we're going to be broadcasting. So let's come over here. We will go back to our Godot project here. We're going to go over to our node and we're going to click on our detection radius here. And we're going to say on body enter. And we're going to say on detection radius body enter. So let's Control A, Control C, click on the Archer enemy. Make sure you click on that and hit connect. And then we're going to have to go ahead and type these in. All right. And that is going to allow us to take a body. So it's going to be an object body. And then we're going to need to do the same thing. Private void with our exit. So we're going to click on this and we're going to say on body exit. And we're going to take this, copy it, connect it. And, oh, I think I connected it to the wrong thing. I did. Disconnect. So let's go ahead and connect it to our Archer enemy, and let's copy that. All right. Object body. Okay, so now that we've got these, when the body enters, let's go ahead and say gd.print body has entered. And we're going to say plus object. All right. And then we're going to do the same thing. We're going to say body has exited. I'm sorry. We're going to say body. So let's go ahead and copy body. My apologies. All right. So now if I save this, I come over here and I go find my Archer enemy. Let's put him. And if I click on this so I don't have to manually move my stuff individually, so that way they're all moving as one big group. I'm going to move this guy. I guess temporarily we'll put him here. I'm going to scale him down by quite a bit because he needs to match our character size. So actually if we just do this, and this is because we're using 2 different packs, so they don't quite match up, but that's okay. This is for demo purposes, so it's okay. But let's go ahead and scale him down so that he kind of matches. So let's see. That's about right. And then we are going to shut that off. We're going to move this. We're going to move this to the center. Oh, goodness. There. We're going to move him back to the center of our little object here. We're going to turn that back on, and then we're going to move our entire object by turning on our little children objects not selectable. So now I'm going to drag him over here, and we're going to go ahead and hit play, and let's see what kind of stuff we get out of this. So as we can see, there was nothing going on and it couldn't seem to detect the player. Well, if we look at our errors, you can see can instance, cannot instance because of class Archer enemy could not be found. Script Archer enemy.cs. One of the things that we need to learn about Godot is that Godot does not allow spaces in your classes, but it does allow spaces in your scripts. So it's just easier to not have the space, because if you have the space, the class name and the actual file doesn't link up, and C# can get very confused very fast. So let's go ahead and recompile and let's try that again. Awesome. So you can see body has entered tile map. So if I actually avoid the spikes and I enter, you can see body has entered kinematic 2D. So that's awesome. Body has exited kinematic 2D. So the reason why is because you can't have spaces in your CS class. So it's best just to make sure that all of your names and everything is lower, or is no spaces, either underscores or just no spaces in general. So now that we have that working, let's go back to our script and let's do some processing here. So what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to say, hey, if the character, if the body that's detected is a character, so if it's the player, so if body is player controller, then I want you to grab, or I want you to like basically attack it, right? Well, the thing is we're going to want the player to do, we're going to want the enemy to do more than just one attack, right? So we're going to want to do that inside of our process section, right? So what we need to do is we need to say, yep, we've detected the player, and we need to attack that said player, right? So we can say private player controller player, right? And then we can say player is equal to body as player controller. And what that's going to do is that's going to cast the body that we got as a player controller, only if it is a player controller. And we're going to do the same thing down here, just kind of in the opposite. So if body is player controller, then we want to say like basically deactivate, right? So we need to make a global boolean here, and we'll say active. Oh goodness, I can't type today. There we go. And we'll say active is equal to true. All right, because we want him to just kind of idle if he's not doing anything, right? All right, so now we're going to say under here, we're going to uncomment this. And we're going to say if active, then I want you to go ahead and print shooting. So now if we go out and run this little project here, so if I go ahead and run this, and then I jump in here, you'll see that we have just a crap ton of shooting. And then if I run out, it stops. Body has exited. So that's perfect. That's what we want. But this is just an unnecessarily large amount of shooting, right? So we need to have it so it has a timing system, right? So that it only shoots every couple seconds instead of all of the time. So if we go over to our enemy, and we come down here and we say, let's see, if able to shoot, let's say, let's go ahead and create ourselves a little boolean here. And we're going to want to make this a, private variable up here. So we'll say private able to shoot, and we'll default that to true, so that way by default when it spawns in, the character can shoot. Now what we need to do is we need to say, hey, if you've shot, able to shoot is going to be equal to false, and then we're going to need to add in a small timing system. And if you guys haven't seen my other stuff when I do that, but it's pretty simple, so I'll show you how to do that real quick. So we'll add a private float shoot timer, and we'll default that to 1. And I'm doing 1F because it's a float. So you're saying, hey, this little bit of data here is a float instead of an integer. And I'm going to add a little reset timer here. Now, the reason why I do this is because it's super easy for you to be able to reset your time. And you can also make it so that the initial shot timer is shorter. So you could say like, hey, you know, the player can shoot. You could say like, for instance, 2, right? So it'll be 1 second wait after their first shot, and then a 2 second wait after their third shot, right? So that's kind of why I do it that way. And also it makes it a little easier for me to do adjustments because I only have to adjust it up here instead of adjusting it throughout the code. So what we're going to do is here, once you shoot, you want to reset your timer. And then you're going to want to set up a small timer inside of your process here. So if shoot timer is less than or equal to 0, then we want to say, then we want to say able to shoot is equal to true. Else, we're going to say shoot timer minus equals 1. Or delta, I'm sorry. We don't want to do 1 because then it'll shoot every frame instead of every other frame. Now I've got a couple of issues here that I got to clean up. And I think that'll do it. Awesome. So now if we go ahead and run this a little bit here, what should happen is it should shoot every second or so. So if I jump, shooting, you can see how it's going much slower than what it was going. So that's perfect. That's exactly what we want. So now that we are at this point, we need to go ahead and have it raycast to the player and make sure that it can shoot at the player, because we don't want it to shoot at the player when they're, you know, below the character or, you know, not within the detection range of that character, right? So what we can do is we can say, hey, if you are able to shoot, then I'm going to say var screen space or space state is equal to get world 2D dot direct space state. And what that's going to give me is it's going to give me access to the physics system. So I could do stuff like, as this says, querying physics and things like that. So it's super useful for doing raycasting through code. So now what we're going to do is we're going to say Godot dot collision or collections dot direct or dictionary result is equal to space state dot intersect ray, which is going to call out a raycast. We're going to say this dot position, comma, wherever our player controller is. So player dot position. And then we're going to pass in a new Godot.collections.array, and we are going to say this. All right, so what does all this do, right? So we're saying, hey, we're going to pass in a raycast. So we're going to call a raycast from the monster to the player, and we're going to ignore the monster. So if the monster has a collision, it doesn't collide with the monster. It can just ignore that collision. So now we're going to say if result, or ES result, does not equal null, because there's a possibility it could equal null, so we want to make sure that we do some null checking here. We are going to want to say if result collider is equal to player, then we're going to want to do our stuff. And we're also going to want to check to see if the result dot has, or contains, I'm sorry. I keep forgetting contains versus has. And if it has the collider here. Awesome. So now we can go ahead and just drag all of this into the raycast, or into the raycasting code here. So now it should only shoot if the player is within distance and is not like obscured by a wall or something like that. So let's go ahead and test this. So if I open up my Godot, and the best way to test this is by jumping around him. So you can see shooting, shooting, shooting. All right, let's dash up and grab, and you can see he's not shooting. Even though we're within his collision, he's not shooting. Now he is, now he is, now he's not. See that? Perfect. So now we need to go about creating our projectile, right? Our arrow that he's going to shoot at them. So what we're going to do is we are going to take right click up here, and we are going to add in a node 2D. We're going to call this arrow. We are going to right click and attach a script to it. We're just going to call it arrow. We need this to create our projectile. And then we are going to add in an area 2D to do collision. We are going to put that underneath arrow. We are going to right click and add in a sprite. And we're going to right click our area 2D and put in a collision shape. So if I zoom in over here and I add in a small rectangle-like shape, and let's just make it something like this. For our sprite, since we don't actually have an arrow sprite, I'm just going to go ahead and use the Godot little design icon here, because I don't actually have the an arrow. So we'll just go ahead and use this. So we'll scale this down like that so it fits within the little tiny arrow. Sweet. So now that we've got this little arrow, we're going to right click and make it into a scene, and we're going to make it into an arrow scene. And then we're going to go ahead and go into the arrow script here, and we are going to go ahead and start coding that. So the first thing we're going to need is we're going to need to make a private variable for speed. So private int speed. And let's just make it default to 150. 150 seems fine. So once we have this little speed variable, what we can do is we can say, hey, let's uncomment our process here. And let's come over here and say, hey, on process, let's take my position plus equals transform.x multiplied by delta multiplied by speed. So what this is going to do is it's going to say, okay, I'm going to move you plus X by time by the speed at which I'm moving. So that allows you to effectively shoot an arrow so it continuously moves on the X axis forever. So now what we need to do is we need to hook up our little area 2D. So we're going to open up our arrow scene. We're going to go into our area. We're going to click on our node and we are going to say on area body entered object body here. And we are going to allow that. And we're going to say private, paste that. And we are going to say object body. If you remember, we did this before. And I forgot my void. Awesome. So now we've got that. We can go ahead and delete it. Just like that. So basically, he's going to shoot it, and when it hits something, it gets removed. Right? Or what we can do is we can come up here and add in a private float life span. And we're going to make that 20 seconds. So if for some reason it gets shot up off into space or something, it will live for 20 seconds and then get deleted and get garbage collected. So what we'll do is we'll say lifespan minus equals 1 or delta, we'll say. And then we'll say if lifespan is less than 0, then we are going to queue free. And that's just a quick way so we don't destroy our memory and we just don't keep keeping all these objects in memory for no reason. This allows us to just kind of garbage collect those out as we move. So now we need to make our archer or our little turret guy shoot the arrow, right? So what we can do is we can come up here and say, okay, we need to first get a reference to that object, right? So let's go ahead and do that. So let's say export and go public packed scene arrow. Then we're going to come down here and we are going to say arrow is equal to arrow.instance as arrow. And what that's going to do is that's going to force this to be cast as an arrow, and it's going to allow us to instance our little arrow. So now what we need to do is we need to say owner dot add child arrow. And the reason why we do this is because if we were to instance this, it would be connected to the archer. So if the archer were to move, that arrow would move with it. So for instance, like if he turned around, the arrow would suddenly just flip going the opposite direction. And we don't want that, obviously. So we're going to go ahead and just allow that to be part of the root of the project. And now what we're going to do is we're going to say arrow dot global transform is equal to this dot get node position 2D, and we're going to grab our position 2D. So I'll just go ahead and copy this. That way I don't have to worry about spelling. Dot global transform. So now that should allow it to spawn that arrow and shoot it at the player, kind of. He's not quite facing the player, so he's not going to be shooting it at the player, but it'll work. So now if we go ahead and save these and we try to run this, you'll see our arrow flies by and we've got a hard crash. So why did it crash? Well, you can see here, null reference exception, object reference not set to an instance of an object. So why would that do that? Well, if we click on our archer enemy and we come over to our inspector, you'll see that our arrow is empty. So we need to go ahead and grab our arrow here and put it inside of our project. Now we're going to go ahead and go back to our main scene, or our arrow scene, and make sure that it's zeroed out. It looks like it is. It just, that little picture kind of concerned me, but it seems to be okay. So we're going to go ahead and save and try that again. And it still crashed. So let's see why it crashed this time. Get node, node not found, position 2D. So if you look, we called it projectile spawn, not position 2D. That was my mistake as well. So now if we try to run that again, you'll see that he is now shooting arrows. Awesome. And if we hit it, it gets removed. See that? So if we come up here, I'm bad at aiming. There we go. And I got hit by it. You see how it removed that arrow. That's perfect. You can see here that it's also removing the arrows as well when it hits this little tile set here. So that's great. So we've got something moving and something going on. So let's go back to our code. We now need the character to kind of shoot at the player to an extent. So what we can do is we can rotate the arrow to go towards the player, if that makes sense. So what we'll do is we will go here and we'll say, look at player.position. Now, I know what you're going to say. This isn't going to look very good because it's not. I can almost guarantee you. But I'll show you a way that we can make this work. So you see how now he's facing the player? So that's great. So now we basically have a turret. So if you're making a little turret for your game, this is exactly what you needed, right? But obviously he looks very stupid. And you can see how he can't shoot us now. He can face us, but he can't shoot us. See that? Which is perfect. But we need to make it so that it's not the player or the enemy that looks at him. We're going to go ahead and instead grab the projectile spawn and tell it to look at the player. So that way it shoots at the player without the guy moving as much. See? Sweet. So now that we have all that, let's go ahead and shelve what we have right now, and let's make sure that our arrow is fully finished, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to say, hey, we need to do damage to the player, right? So if our body is a kinematic 2D body, and the reason why I'm doing this is because instead of doing if it's the player, I'm going to allow it to damage anybody that's not some kind of set dressing. So if it's just a kinematic 2D, it can damage the character. It makes things way more fun, especially when there's multiple enemies and you're shooting and the enemies can hit each other. It's kind of cool. It's a cool little interaction, right? So we can say if body is player controller, then I want to go ahead and say player controller PC is equal to body as player controller. So that way it casts it over. And PC dot take damage. And we're going to go ahead and tell it, I don't remember if I think it just takes 1 damage. It's been a minute since I've looked at the player controller. So let's go ahead and take a look at it. Yep. So now if I get shot, see, it bounces me. Well, in this case, it's bouncing me forward, which is kind of strange. And also, that's kind of a weird bug. We'll have to look at that. So you'll see that the player is not being respawned and his animation has not stopped playing even after he gets hit. That's because the first thing we need to do is we need to check if their health is greater than 0. And if it is, then we can run all of this code. Right? So now if I come over here and I run this little bit of code here, and I run over and I get shot, and I get shot again, and I get shot again, you'll see that now at least the animation is finished playing, right? But you'll also notice that we are not respawning. And the reason why we're not responding is if we click on our player here and we look over at our signals, because we made it because we moved everything into its own scene, the signal got disconnected. So we need to double click on this and click on our game manager and reconnect that signal on player death. So now that we've went through and reconnected that signal, if we run in here and we get shot and we die and we respawn. So that's how you fix that small little bug there. So now we want the enemy to figure out which direction we are based in relation to it. So let's go ahead and take a look as to how to do that. So the first thing that we're going to want to do is we are going to want to get the angle of the player in relation to the character, right? In relation to the monster. So we'll say var angle is equal to global position dot angle to point, and then we'll say player dot position, or dot global position, I'm sorry, because we want to get the global position. Then we can say if math dot abs angle is greater than math f dot pi divided by 2. And then from there we can say, okay, if math.abs angle is greater than math f dot pi divided by 2. I think we could probably get away with math f, to be honest with you, .abs. I'm not really sure what the big difference between math f and math is, but I'm just going to go with math f. Get node animated sprite dot flip h is equal to, whoops, false. Else, we're going to go ahead and do the exact same thing. Get node and all of that. True. So what is this doing? Because there's a lot of stuff going on here. So what this basically just says is, hey, get the angle of the player from the global position of the character, right? So you have the player and the enemy, well, the player and the enemy, right? So what we're doing is we're saying get that angle, and then if that angle is greater than 90 degrees, then go ahead and flip your animation, right? So I will show you. All right, now if we come in here, see how he flips, and then if I jump over here, he flips again. See that? Which is great. Okay, so now that we have this going, let's go ahead and set up our basic animations. Okay, so let's go into our animated sprite. We already have 2 of them, idle and shooting. We set those up earlier, so let's go ahead and hook those in. First, we're going to say, hey, if the player is not active, right? So if they're not shooting, I should be saying, else go ahead and play or get node like this. And well, let me just go ahead and grab the animated sprite node. It's just easier. So if we go ahead and get node animated sprite dot play idle. So now if the player, or if the enemy is not currently attacking you, he's going to play his idle animation, right? See how he's idling? Oh, I got hit. See how he's idling over there? Which is perfect. So now we are going to go ahead and say, all right, if he's played his, or if he's animating and he's attacking a player, right? If he's going to be going ahead and shooting a player, we're going to go ahead and play our shooting animation. So if able to shoot, then come over here and play. So get our node animated sprite dot play down here. Shoot. I believe I have it as shoot. Shooting. All right. So if we come over here, but he's not playing his animation, right? And the reason why is because he is playing his animation, but he's only playing it for 1 frame, because this idle animation needs to not happen if he is still playing his shooting animation. So if you remember how we did our character controller, we're going to do something very similar. So we're going to say public bool is shooting. And we are going to default that to false. And we're going to come down here and we're going to say if he is shooting. So if he's not shooting, then we're going to go ahead and do that. And if he is shooting, and is shooting will be equal to true. So now if we come over here, we should see him shooting. There we go. Now, there's some issues here that we're going to have to figure out. Mainly being that his shooting animation does not match up with his actual shooting. See that? But what we can do is we can come here and say animation finished and pass that to our archer enemy and go ahead and copy that, connect it. And then we're going to come down here and we're going to say private void on animation finished, right? And if we come over to our player controller and we actually take a look at our little animation finished, let's just go ahead and copy that because it's way easier just to copy and paste code than it is to actually do it yourself. And we'll change this to shooting, animated sprite dot stop. And instead of doing that, we're going to say, let's copy all of this. And actually, I want if able to shoot. Yeah, let's go ahead and pull this out and let's put it in here. So now he's shooting here. And then let's go ahead and grab all of this little bit of code, cut that out and say private void shoot at player. And I'm going to do a lowercase s because that's how it works. And then we are going to paste that in there. There we go. So that it's a little bit easier for us to maintain, especially if we want to maintain it for a long term. And actually, we don't need this here anymore. We're going to tell it to do it down here. And then if the animation's finished, then we are going to say shooting is equal to false, and that should throw him back to a standard animation state. And then we are also going to say public, or I should say private actually, private animated sprite, and then we'll go ahead and set that here as well for some consistency's sake, and so that we're not using so many get nodes. It'd just be better off. So if we come through here and we just kind of get rid of this stuff here. There, that's a little bit better. It's a little cleaner. And I'm going to go ahead and format my document because it's just a good idea to format your document. It lets, you let Visual Studio Code just kind of handle it. All right. So now let's go ahead and see what that did, because to be honest with you, I'm not sure. So let's see what it did. Whoops, I didn't mean to hit that. Oh, that's close. See that? But we're going to need to tell it to go ahead and shoot before that, right? So the question is, how are we going to do that? So the first thing we're going to have to do to solve this problem, unfortunately, is by splitting up our animations. So if we come over here to our little archer character, we can go to our animated sprites and you'll see that he has a shoot animation. And if I kind of go over to our animation and I move to through our frames here, you'll see here is where he shoots, right? So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to separate this into its own little animation, these little frames here. So what we'll do is we'll remove these frames. So now his animation frame is only until he draws back his bow. And we'll rename this drawback. And then we'll go ahead and hit new and type shoot. And then we'll go ahead and click on our little open file button. And we'll go to our archer hero. And we will do our, I believe it's normal attack. And then we'll go ahead and change our horizontal until it matches up. And then we're going to grab these 3 frames so he goes back to his idle animation. So you can see here, if I go to drawback, he pulls back, draws, and then shoot. He shoots and then retracts back to his original state. See that? Perfect. So now that we have these 2 set up, so that's drawback and shoot, now we need to go back to our archer enemy and we need to go down here and instead of playing shooting, play drawback. And I want to make sure that I did that correctly without the capital B. And now once the animation is completed, we come down here and do drawback. We're going to say, okay, once that animation is completed, let's come down here and let's move this over here. I believe I just called it shoot. Yep. There we go. We will go ahead and grab our animated sprite.play, our shooting animation. So what that should do is it should, and actually I think we'll have to do it this way. And then do it like this. There, I think that will work. And now if we go to our drawback and we go and change our drawback so it goes to our draw, we're going to also want to change our projectile spawn location over like this and then up like this. So that way it kind of shoots from the correct location. So now if we go ahead and test this, let's see what it does. Perfect. That's exactly what we wanted. Awesome. That's perfect. That's exactly what we wanted. Awesome. So that's all I have for you guys today. We talked about creating an archer-like enemy. We went through the process and created an arrow for that archer enemy. We went ahead and coded our arrow so it does damage to the player. And we went through the process of coding our archer enemy so he shot at the player and timed his shooting properly. So if you like this video, go ahead and hit that like button. If you dislike this video, go ahead and hit that dislike button because I am here to make content for you guys. Now, this little series was an entire user request from you guys. So I do look at our comments and I do try to make videos that you guys are interested in. So if you guys have any suggestions, throw them in the comments below. But that's all I have for you guys today. So thank you so much for watching and I'll see y'all next time. Thanks.